The early weeks of 2026 have carried a strange, heavy quiet. Not the kind that arrives all at once, but the kind that settles slowly, almost unnoticed at first, until you realize just how much has changed in such a short time. Names that once felt permanent have begun to disappear from the present tense. Voices that once filled radios, theaters, and living rooms now exist only in recordings and memory. Faces that felt like familiar companions, people we never met, yet somehow knew, are suddenly gone. In the span of just a few months, the world has said goodbye to a remarkable number of figures who helped shape culture across generations. Some of them had been quietly fighting battles behind the scenes, illnesses they carried with dignity and privacy. Others were taken suddenly, without warning, leaving behind a kind of shock that takes longer to process. Together, they represent more than just celebrity. They represent moments, chapters in our own lives tied to their work. When we talk about loss in the public sphere, it's easy to focus on achievements, awards, and milestones. But what lingers longer are the feelings these people created. A laugh during a difficult time. A performance that stayed with you long after the credits rolled. A song that somehow understood exactly what you were going through. These are the things that transform public figures into something more personal. And that's why the losses of early 2026 feel particularly close. They aren't just headlines, they're reminders of time passing, of eras quietly coming to an end. Take Catherine O'Hara, for instance. For many, the first image that comes to mind is that unforgettable moment in Home Alone, the frantic realization, the desperate rush, the raw panic of a mother who knows something is terribly wrong. It could have been played for simple comedy, just another exaggerated character in a holiday film. But O'Hara gave it weight. She grounded it in something real, something deeply human. That ability, to take something broad and infuse it with sincerity, was the defining thread of her career. Long before Home Alone, she had already carved out a reputation as one of the most versatile comedic performers of her generation through her work on SCTV. It was there that she honed a skill few truly master, making characters feel lived in, no matter how absurd the premise. Directors recognized that quality immediately. Tim Burton cast her in Beetlejuice, where she balanced eccentricity with emotional truth, and later in The Nightmare Before Christmas, where her voice brought Sally to life in a way that still resonates decades later. Christopher Guest relied on her repeatedly in his mockumentaries, trusting her to navigate the delicate balance between satire and sincerity. And then, in what felt like a second act many actors never get, she introduced the world to Moira Rose in Schitt's Creek. It was a performance unlike anything else on television, strange, theatrical, endlessly inventive. But beneath the wigs and the accent was something deeply committed. It earned her an Emmy, yes, but more importantly, it introduced her brilliance to an entirely new generation. When she passed away on January 30, 2026, at the age of 71, it felt like losing not just an actress, but a singular presence, someone whose exact combination of humor and humanity cannot be replicated. Just weeks later, the world said goodbye to Robert Duvall, a man whose career spanned the very foundations of modern American cinema. There was never anything flashy about Duvall's performances. He didn't demand attention, he earned it, quietly, patiently. From his early role as Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird to his unforgettable portrayal of Tom Hagen in The Godfather, he embodied a kind of stillness that carried immense power. He understood something fundamental about acting, that what isn't said often matters more than what is. In Apocalypse Now, his Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore became iconic not because of volume, but because of presence, a man so consumed by his own mythology that he seemed detached from reality itself. And in Tender Mercies, the role that earned him an Academy Award, he delivered a performance so understated that it almost felt like you were watching a real person rather than an actor. When he passed away on February 15, 2026, at the age of 95, it wasn't just the end of a life, it was the closing of a chapter in film history. His family asked people to remember him by watching his work, by sharing stories, by simply taking a quiet drive. It felt fitting. That's the kind of legacy he built. Then there was James Van Der Beek, whose passing at just 48 carried a different kind of weight. For many who grew up in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Dawson's Creek wasn't just a television show, it was a mirror. His character, Dawson Leary, spoke in long, thoughtful sentences about life, love, and purpose. It could have easily felt overdone, but Van Der Beek played it with sincerity. He made earnestness feel acceptable at a time when many were learning to hide it. In later years, he showed a willingness to laugh at himself, to step outside the image that first made him famous. That self-awareness made him even more relatable. When he publicly revealed his stage 3 colorectal cancer diagnosis in 2024, he approached it with the same openness that defined his career. His passing on February 11, 2026, surrounded by his family, shifted the focus away from fame and towards something more meaningful, the kind of person he was in private. The tributes that followed spoke less about television and more about fatherhood, about kindness, about presence. And in the end, that says more than any role ever could. The loss of Jesse Jackson just days later marked the passing of a figure whose impact extended far beyond any single moment. His life intersected with history at one of its most pivotal points, standing just feet away from Martin Luther King Jr. on that tragic day in 1968. But what defined him wasn't that moment, it was everything that followed. He built movements, organized communities, and gave voice to people who had long been excluded from the national conversation. His campaigns for the presidency in the 1980s weren't just political efforts, they were statements about representation and possibility. "Keep Hope Alive" became more than a slogan. It became a philosophy that carried through decades of change. Even as illness gradually took his voice in later years, the message remained. When he passed away on February 17, 2026, at 84, the call from his family was simple: continue the work. It's a reminder that some legacies aren't meant to be remembered, they're meant to be carried forward. Eric Dane's story feels unfinished, not just because of his relatively young age, but because of how much he continued to evolve as an actor and person. While many remember him as the confident and charismatic Dr. Mark Sloan, or McSteamy, from Grey's Anatomy, that role was only one chapter of his career. Over time, he moved into more layered and challenging performances, especially in Euphoria, where he played a deeply troubled character with a rawness that showed his true range. His ALS diagnosis in 2025 shifted his life dramatically, yet instead of stepping away quietly, he chose to speak out, raising awareness and pushing for research funding. Even as his condition worsened, he remained focused on making a difference, showing strength and determination in the face of something he couldn't control. His passing in 2026 at 53 wasn't just the loss of a talented actor, but of someone who spent his final chapter fighting not only for himself, but for others facing the same battle. His ALS diagnosis in 2025 changed everything. What followed was not withdrawal, but action. He used his remaining time to advocate for research, to raise awareness, to fight for others facing the same condition. His death on February 19, 2026, at 53, feels particularly difficult because of what he was still trying to do. But perhaps that effort, that refusal to fade quietly, is exactly what defines his legacy. Music, too, lost one of its enduring voices with the passing of Neil Sedaka. His career was a testament to resilience in an industry that often moves on quickly. From early success in the Brill-building era to a period of decline and an eventual comeback, he experienced every phase of artistic life. Songs like Calendar Girl and Breaking Up Is Hard to Do became part of the cultural fabric, while his later resurgence proved that reinvention is always possible. When he passed away on February 27, 2026, just weeks shy of his 87th birthday, it came as a shock. He had remained active, performing well into his later years. His life serves as a reminder that creativity doesn't have an expiration date. Robert Carradine's passing on February 23, 2026, highlighted a legacy built more on connection than fame. While Revenge of the Nerds wasn't considered a major cinematic masterpiece, it struck a chord with audiences who identified as outsiders, giving the film lasting cultural value. Years later, he reached a new generation through his role as the caring father in Lizzie McGuire, showing his versatility and warmth on screen. Beyond acting, his family's honesty about his long struggle with bipolar disorder brought attention to mental health, helping shift the conversation toward empathy and reducing stigma, which added deeper meaning to the life he lived and the impact he left behind. Jennifer Runyon's passing on March 6, 2026, may not have made major headlines, but it still carried meaning because she represented the kind of actor who quietly supports the stories we love. She wasn't always the main star, yet her roles, like her brief but memorable appearance in Ghostbusters, added charm and authenticity that helped scenes feel real and engaging. Actors like her often go unrecognized, but they are essential in bringing balance and depth to films and television. Her legacy is a reminder that even small roles can leave a lasting impression, and sometimes that subtle impact is just as important as leading performances. Finally, Lou Holtz, who passed away on March 4, 2026, at the age of 89, is remembered not just for his success as a football coach, but for the mindset and values he consistently shared throughout his life. Beyond his impressive record and achievements, he was known for emphasizing discipline, hard work, and the belief that a person's attitude plays a major role in determining their success. His speeches and interviews often blended humor with life lessons, making his words resonate far beyond the field. For many, he wasn't just a coach, but a source of motivation and guidance, which is what truly defines his lasting legacy. 10 lives. 10 different paths. And yet, they all converge in the same place, in the memories they leave behind. The early months of 2026 have reminded us that time moves forward whether we're ready or not. But they've also reminded us of something else, that the impact of a life isn't measured only in years, but in moments. And those moments, once created, don't disappear. They stay with us, quietly shaping the way we see the world. If any of these names meant something to you, a film you watched, a song you loved, a performance you never forgot, then their story continues in a small but meaningful way. And sometimes, that's the most lasting legacy of all.